Hello everyone, Trainmaster04 here, and as promised earlier in my recent announcement under my community page on my channel, Lionel has come out with a new announcement for a new 125th anniversary product, and so I decided let's go ahead and make a small little video. Now this video itself shouldn't be too crazy long as considering usually when I do make videos such as this on my laptop, it's going over an actual catalog from either January or even from July, but since this is just a special announcement, this shouldn't take more than a few minutes. So going over the actual locomotive itself, as you saw in the community page, is the return of the J1e class of New York Central Hudsons. Now, if you're not familiar with the Hudsons, which is perfectly fine, the Hudsons themselves were produced starting with the J1 class, or with engine number 5200, and ended up with J1e number 5344. In 1937, Lionel came out with a new scale die-cast model. At this point in time, Lionel had just survived the Great Depression to the point that they were now more than ever stable to actually come into new innovations. And in this case, it was going into die-cast models. At the time, there were high-scale models in die-cast, but they just were not of the high production quality that Lionel was used to. In this case, they were either scratch-built from different kits, from different frames to conglomerate into something that looks like a New York Central Hudson, but in this case, Lionel decided in 37 to actually go the whole hog and produce the 700E. The 700E itself was a very expensive model for the time and also was considered the most detailed die-cast model steam locomotive of its time and held that same record for many, many years. It was based off of engine number 5344, the last J1e Hudson ever produced by or ordered by the New York Central, and it also became the first New York Central Hudson and the first steam locomotive in the United States to receive full-on streamlining, and then became the Commodore Vanderbilt. Now, getting into the actual Vision Line J1e Hudson, besides the 1937 issue, Lionel throughout the years has come back to their roots with this famous engine, what I like to call the granddaddy of all Hudsons, and they first came back in 1990 with Richard Kuhn at the helm, and they were able to implement rail sounds with the help of Neil Young, and that in itself was actually quite a really good, genuine pre-war 700E, where it had the detail and the feel of an actual 700E, but with a modern twist with a more powerful Pullman motor, smoke, and sound within it. I fortunately have one in my collection as I speak, and as a result, it may end up actually being sold off to maybe fund for one of these future Hudsons, these newer 700E Hudsons. But since then, the 700E has kind of been in a limbo. It wasn't seen until in 2010 when Lionel first announced their Vision Line lineup with the Santa Fe 3000 and the Pennsylvania Railroad's 0880, the CC S2, if I remember correctly. Forgive me on that classification. It's been a while since I remembered what the number was, but the next Vision Line Lionel decided to produce was actually the reissue of the J1E. And in that case, the J1E, or the 700E, however you want to call it, it wasn't the greatest model in the sense of high detail. The idea of, at the time, is really just give us a more modernized version of the pre-war model, more of the 1990 version. Now, in this case, for the new J1e Hudsons, it is actually the exact opposite. Lionel is throwing out, basically, the original tooling, saying this in a metaphorical way, and producing J1e Hudsons with brand new tools that are specific to each road number and also to each specific road name. Now, as stated, this is Lionel's 125th anniversary, which means that this is going to be a 2025 special production run for the next upcoming year, and we'll probably see yet even more information about these Hudsons when the January 2025 Volume 1 catalog comes out. But I do enjoy these early releases because this allows people to actually go ahead and pre-order before the actual event begins, and then more importantly, when these do get produced, which Mr. Muffin's Trains is estimating the fourth quarter of the 2025, so around this time a year from now, so you'll definitely have these engines available when 2025 is actually here. So this is really nice in the fact that Lionel is actually doing this. Now, as stated, the New York Central Hudsons are just some of the most iconic locomotives, and since this is Lionel's 125th anniversary, there is nothing better than to actually go ahead with one of the most iconic and one of the most sought-after pre-war locomotives Lionel has ever produced. And in reality, what better can you do but produce it under the Vision Line name and also give it what it actually deserves. A J1E that is held up to the same standards as 1937, but now in 2024, 2025, to the point that now we have all these wonderful new details, new information, a great community of the New York Central Historical Society, and also new electronics to go into them. So this is really a good time to actually go and pre-order one of these J1Es, in my opinion, considering the original Vision Line J1Es. Even the gunmetal gray boiler version is going around $2,100 to $3,000, and that in comparison to its original MSRP price is incredible. So this will definitely be an investment worthwhile. For features, in this case, there is going to be an interior illumination in the cab, so something basic you would expect from Lionel. Hand-painted crew figures and gauges, valves, firebox gull effect, of course. The swinging bell is making a comeback on these J1Es, which is something that I think most of us do associate the original Vision Line 700E to be. They're also going to include operating headlight and bicolor classification lights where appropriate. In the past, Lionel, on some of their J3As and other New York Central Hudsons, they really didn't go and get the classification lights correctly, even in the post-production of their actual products. So hopefully this will go quite nicely. Of course, a rear electric coupler. And then a new feature that is coming into the Vision Line product range for the 700Es is the kinematic drawbar and force coupler. Now, the kinematic drawbar is nothing new, especially in the Vision Line world, and nor is the force coupler, but it is new to the 700E. If you remember back in my Union Pacific Vision Line Big Boy product review on Mr. Muffin's specialty run of engine number 4000, there was actually the force coupler featured on it, and when I was operating that locomotive, it was so much fun being able to back up the locomotive into a string of cars, the coupler sensor being able to feel, well, I say feel with quotation marks, that collision and play the simulated sounds automatically. Typically, this is nothing new, especially with DC-C, especially in HO, but typically only that feature is operated via a command button, but this being automatic just helps things to be just so much more seamlessly. So I'm definitely excited to see that in this next Vision Line locomotive. So for the offering of these 700Es, of course, their hallmark locomotive that they are offering is engine number 5344. Now, on 5344, there is some new interesting details that are not seen in either the 2010 Vision Line 700E or even the 1990 and 1937 to 1941 700Es, and that is the detail on the tender is different. In this case, there is actually going to be a separately applied water scoop underneath the tender, which is a very nice detail considering these engines did have the water scoop. And then on the locomotive itself, the details are out of this world in comparison to the original 700Es. These are really turning into be quite a scale model that is meant to be what the 1937 700E was not able to accomplish due to Lionel's ability at that time. But now with days coming up and also newer technologies, newer skills coming into the forefront, why not go and use them? For the price tag for all of these Vision Line Hudsons, it is actually not as high as I was expecting, considering that typically when a Vision Line product comes out, especially a steam locomotive with all this new detail, all of this new tooling, and all of this new features, or I should say Vision Line features, typically I would expect this engine to be going around $2,000. But in this case, I've actually been surprised by $200 less, right at $1,800. Now, I know I keep mentioning Mr. Muffins a lot in this video, and that's because currently, as I last have checked as of the making of this video, the Mr. Muffins is currently one of the few dealers that are actually already showing these locomotives available for pre-order, and what's even better is Mr. Muffins is also giving quite a good discount. If I remember correctly, it's around $16.50 per locomotive, and then if you order two, there's a further discount with a special code if you do pre-order two. No deposit down, but definitely a better price tag than paying MSRP. Minimum curve radius, depending on the tender, is either 0.54 for the standard tender or 0.72 with the PT tender. And then getting over to the other locomotives, Lionel is definitely pulling out all the stops when it comes to showing off the specific detail. In this case, this is where most of those changes are coming in, and hopefully a lot of people, and hopefully the manufacturer, whoever Lionel uses either in China or Vietnam, that this will end up being taken note of. So for the locomotives themselves, Lionel's producing New York Central number 5403, New York Central number 5320, Hudson number 6620 from the Big Four region of the New York Central, a normal 5401 New York Central Hudson with the PT tender, which in this case Lionel's bringing back that wonderful New York or Vision Line Niagara PT tender with water scoop smoke effect feature. So in this case, the locomotive with PT tenders will be a little bit more expensive since they have to cover that feature. In this case, it will be a figure of $1,900. Still, you'll have that better deal from the dealerships. Then you've also got the New York Central 5315 and the beautiful late 1920s era striping. I can definitely see that being used on many layouts since it is an iconic paint scheme for the New York Central. So classy, like a tuxedo. And then Lionel's also offering some what-if paint schemes because in this case that is primarily where Lionel's bread and butter is. That's where it brings in the interest of the modelers, especially for those that are more into the fun side and more collectability side of things, because these are typically the lower end or lower production run locomotives since they are just different, not prototypical. In this case, they're producing the very nice 20th Century Limited styled gray and blue paint scheme with a PT tender number 5330, a Peacemaker with the standard New York Central tender number 5340, which, as a matter of fact, 5340 was the engine number on the 1990 version of the 700E, so it's nice to actually see that engine number coming back into the limelight a little bit. And then Lionel's also producing a different road name that has also been seen, and that is the Toronto, Hamilton, and Buffalo number 502. Now, some of the more specific details are not quite well seen in the renderings of these models. What I can say, though, there are a few minute details that can definitely be seen from the naked eye. That being whether the inclusion of marker lights, such as on 5344, 5403, or the exclusion of marker lights, such as 5320. Now, also, depending on the road name or the region that these locomotives are based off of, there will also either be the inclusion or the exclusion of water scoop details underneath the tender. Now, of course, this doesn't come into effect with the PT tenders since that is its own beast, but for instance, such as number 6620, and it should be the Toronto, Hamilton, and Buffalo engines, those two, if I remember correctly, should not have any water scoop features, or water scoop details, I should say, underneath the tenders themselves. For further information, if you would like to actually go and get any more specific details, such as what locomotives have and don't have any of these details, and also actually get to see some of the 3D renderings of the actual models being designed, I would suggest going and clicking or downloading with your smart device this QR code. This QR code will actually take you directly to a private video that Lionel has not released publicly yet on the actual Vision Line J1e Hudson catalog review. As you can see, I've already made a comment. Of course I would. And really, this video is a good one-stop shop to get any further details that I may have missed. But overall, I am quite pleased with how this catalog, or I should say more of a brochure, has turned out, since that's really what it is. I was quite surprised that the J1e Hudson would be coming back, but then again, considering it has been 14 years since the last J1e has ever been produced, really making a comeback is quite nice, especially considering it is the 125th anniversary. Yes, it's kind of like whipping a dead horse of Lionel continuing to produce all of these specialty runs of this locomotive, that locomotive, and saying, oh, we're celebrating the 120th, the 125th. But in reality, you have no idea whether or not a company is still going to survive, and being able to survive for this long should be celebrated, in my opinion, as really, if Lionel does go out of business, it will, in my opinion, would be sad. So it is nice to go and celebrate while we have the moment of now. So as a result, I still have to crunch the numbers on my end to decide whether or not I actually want to go and spend my hard-earned money on a 700E. But I'll definitely keep my ear on the ground whether or not there's going to be any changes, differences, or anything like that, and definitely will keep you all posted either through YouTube Shorts or even under the community page. But anyway, that is it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it, nor I hope you found this actually boring but informative, especially when you're going into possibly considering purchasing one of these models. But without further ado, I'll end this video right there, and I'll see y'all next time.